Welcome to the introductory lecture on design thinking. I would like to share my perceptions and my thoughts in the process of design thinking in this lecture. When it comes to the words of design and innovation, they are part of our thinking process. Right from our childhood, we used to design so many things on our own, and we used to innovate on several occasions. It is there in our thinking process. But when it comes to the real world, actual business or technology or science or engineering, whatever, these processes of design and thinking play a major role in advancing the society for betterment. In this process, in the field of engineering, the concept of design has its own roots, starting with mechanical engineering, civil engineering, and other engineering branches as well. And when it comes to the business processes and medical processes, everywhere the designing process has its own role to play with. Now, why this design thinking has evolved as a new concept is an issue here that we need to understand. The process of design is known for several years, and in all branches of engineering as well as fields of science and technology also. The process of design has its own roots, but still, in the process of creating a scientific approach to the designing process and the thought process that goes into the designing, several interesting features has come up, and it evolved into a new branch of designing called design thinking. Basically, whenever a new machine is created or a new mechanism is created or a new methodology is created with dealing with the people, very less or sometimes no interface with the people who are actually have to use it may be taken, or sometimes very little exposure is given to the people actually who are using it, who are going to use it. In that process, even though the design is based strongly on the engineering principles or scientific principles or business principles, but it may or may not satisfy the customers, to the end customers, to the maximum level. To bridge this gap in the process of designing methodology for thinking process that goes into the design, this design thinking has come into picture. Basically, design thinking is a human-centered approach to solve the problems faced by the society creatively, and it can be loosely thought of as it is design thinking is for the people, of the people, and by the people. It revolves around the humans or the persons that you are using any innovation, and the basic principle here is people who are actually facing the problem holds the key to the solution as well, because they are the people who are facing the problem, and they are going to provide us information regarding to identify the suitable solutions. From their feelings, from their inputs, we can get so many insights into the possible solutions to arrive at. That is why empathy, the ability to understand others' feelings, plays a major role in design thinking. There's a starting point for the design thinking process. And apart from empathy, the collaborative approach, where not a single, usually design thinking process does not involve a single individual. Usually it is done with a group of people, because ideas can be generated, a variety of ideas can be generated, and each one of them will respond to the situation in a different way. We need to take into consideration all others' feelings and all other their inputs. That's why collaborative approach is the most important thing in the design thinking process. And co-creation, and we need to create new ideas, new mechanisms, and stakeholders' feedback is going to be a major factors in the process of design thinking. And the creativity and innovation should be unlocked in each of the designers in the group, and we need to weigh the innovative approaches offered by each of the members in a suitable way and the best possible solution has to be arrived at. This is what about the entire process of design thinking involves. And the basic qualities that a design thinker has to have are open-minded and creative, target-oriented, and collaborative, humanitarian, inquisitive, and enterprising individual. These are some of the major qualities that we expect for any design thinker. Design thinking process is always associated with innovation. We need to innovate. What is the starting point of innovation and how does it happen? When it will happen? To understand this, we need to start with the desire. Desire is a starting point of any innovation. Desire to have something, desire to do something, desire to innovate something is the starting point. Once we desire, the thought process drives us to think, is it technically feasible or not? I may desire to have a flying car, but that's my desire. Is it technically feasible? What are the technical principles, guiding principles that allows us to design a flying car? Again, technical feasibility may be a function of time. At this point of time, it may be feasible, it may not be feasible, or down the line 10 years or 20 years or 50 years, it may be feasible. So technical feasibility, once it is known that it is technically feasible, we can have a design of the car and we can create a prototype as well. But the next thing comes is viability. Suppose to design such a thing, if it takes 100 crores, is it viable? No, it's not viable. So business orientation comes into picture, and if that business orientation is not taken into consideration, then it may be an innovation, but it becomes a useless innovation. Once it is not viable, it becomes a useless innovation. Maybe an innovation, but it is useless, not useful to the public or the society at present. But if it becomes viable, if it comes cheaper, then the viability comes into picture and the innovation will have an impact on the society. So every innovation need not have the viability, but those innovations which have the viability to do the business is going to rule the world. That is how all the business world things and any technology that is being created for the betterment of the society should be viable. Most of the innovations that are viable shall be guided with the following parameters, some of the parameters rather. The first one is what is the situation or the problem to deal with. That's a starting point. Once we know the problem or the situation, then what are the constraints? What are the constraints that are to be applied to arrive at the solutions? If we don't follow the constraints, the solution is wayward, useless. Once we know the constraints, then what are the objectives, end goals or outcomes of the innovation? We need to have a fix of those end objectives. Once we fix the objectives, then who are the target groups or the end users who are going to use it? If we don't consider the target groups into consideration, our innovation may fail. Though it is technically feasible, it may fail. Though it is viable, it may fail. Because if the end user is not satisfied, even though it is viable, if the end user is not satisfied with the functionalities or the processes that we design, it becomes useless. So audience or the target audience is also a very important group. That's a major concept in design thinking. And estimate the resources. What are the resources required for the innovation? And you need to have an estimate on that. And finally, what is the scope of the innovation? Once we limit our scope for innovation, then all these parameters will guide our innovation process. And nowadays, the process of design thinking is being successfully applied in almost all walks of life or domains, like wherever human interface is involved. In so many business processes, for business strategies, it is being applied, and societal problems, to solve some of the societal problems, the process is being applied, and technological applications, the reachability of the technology applications to the masses is also being applied, and even to the extent of personality development. So that is where the design thinking process has gone in to make an impact on the society. Now let us quickly dive into the overview of the design thinking process. Design thinking is a step-by-step process and an iterative process. It got 5 to 6 steps. It starts with empathize, wherein the target audience for whom the entire innovation need to happen is the target audience. We need to understand their pains, we need to understand their experiences, we need to understand their problems, and we need to understand their environment. All these things comes into picture, and we need to have a variety of mechanisms. We need to devise variety of mechanisms to collect the inputs from the people who are actually involved in the entire process. That is the first step of empathize. Once we do that, from the inputs given from the users who are actually involved, we need to define the problem first. The definition of the problem is very, very crucial, because that is going to fix the boundaries for us to innovate. And then the next step is ideate. So within those boundaries, with the problems that we identify in the empathize step, we need to create ideation phase, where all the people involved have to come up with alternative solutions, various possibilities to solve the problem. Once we have the ideation phase, we need to weigh the ideas of different stakeholders and different members in the design group, and we have to identify the best possible solutions. Not only one, but alternative solutions may be there. So we need to identify, we have to come up with solutions, possible solutions for that. And then we need to create a prototype. We need to have a solution of a model solution, and we need to test it on the model solution has to be tested again. Once we test the model solution, then we have to try to implement it. Even the implementation, in the process of implementation, again we have to go for empathize, because where we have started, whether our implementation is actually meeting the requirements of the target audience or not. Not only that, all the steps, at every step, it's an iterative process. You are going back again and you are checking whether it is incompatible with the previous steps or not. So like this, the prototype has to again go with the empathize step, and define will go back to empathize, ideate has to go back to define, and test has to go back to prototype, like this. So it's an iterative process, may not be once, maybe requiring several times until we're convinced that this is going to work. So finally, once we reach the implementation phase, that's the end of the process. So if you observe, it can be broadly, all the steps can be broadly classified into 3 steps or 3 phases rather. First one is understand phase, where the empathize phase and define steps are involved. We need to interact with the people and define the problem. This is a understand phase. And the next phase is exploration. We need to come up with the ideas and prototypes. It's the ideation phase or exploration phase. And then materialize, then test it, implementation. Testing and implementation goes to the materialization phase. So the entire process can be classified into 3 phases. Ever since design thinking has come into existence and widely being applied in all walks of life, it tends to evolve in different flavors. Here I'm going to present one more flavor of the same concept, but applied in a slightly modified way, but the core principles are same. The processing is same, it's only a different flavor of the same thing. Here again we have 3 phases: inspiration phase, ideation phase, and implementation phase. Only words are reframed. Previously we understood it as understand phase, now it is taken as inspiration phase, that's it. And again the inspiration phase consists of exploration and empathize. Previously we have started with empathize and then define. Slight variations. So first it asks us to explore, reframe the opportunities, whatever the opportunities available, you reframe the opportunities, explore it, and then ideate, empathize. Empathize means the target groups, whatever who are there, interact with them to get insights, deeper understanding of the problem. Once you get that, you then experiment and engage. Experiment, refresh your solutions, innovations, innovative ideas. That's the ideation phase of the previous one. And then engage, reaffirm your plans, and then evolve. It's the experimentation phase and implementation phase. More or less, all the things are same. Only thing is, it's a reframing of the same thing in a different flavor. That's it. And one more interesting feature here is the thinking process. Actually, this thinking process that goes into the design thinking is well depicted in this picture. It's a divergent and convergent nature of divergent and convergent nature. It starts with divergence and gradually converges at every phase of inspiration or ideation or implementation. If you look at it, diverges. First, it diverges. It goes to the maximum possible extent of divergence, and then sum up all those things and converge to a particular thing. And then next phase starts, ideation phase. Again, go for divergence, and then converge to one level. Again, diverge and converge. This is a beautiful picturization of the entire design thinking process, which captures the essence of divergence and convergence of the thinking processes that goes into the design thinking. So more or less, all the flavors will teach the same thing, will talk the same thing, but only the words that we use may be different. And that too, the place or the problem for which you are applying may require slight modifications to the jargon that we use, but still the entire process is more or less same. Now, if we go into the brief history of design thinking, it dates back to 1960s, where when people have started thinking, the process of thinking as a scientific approach, with a scientific approach. What is the science behind the thinking process, and what is the scientific principles that guides the design process? So in an effort, they have come up with several research articles and then books as well. Particularly, Herbert Simon was the first to mention design as a science or way of thinking. And he has published a book, the name Sciences of the Artificial in 1969. And that is one of the pioneering works on design thinking. And Peter Rowe at Harvard published his book on design thinking with the name of Design Thinking in 1987. But the major breakthrough where it came into limelight is when in 1990s, when David Kelly has started a consulting firm with the name of Design Thinking, a first ever company which came up to serve the purpose in the name of Design Thinking in 1990s. And it has successfully demonstrated the process of design thinking, how it is going to make huge impact on businesses and several fields of or walks of life, the application of the principle. And even now, the IDEO, the company which was started by David Kelly and Tom Kelly, is one of the pioneers in this design thinking process. In this competitive world where customer is prime and the feelings of the customers is important, is going to matter, is going to change the business altogether. People have quickly realized this process, and even major chains like Apple, IBM, Google, PepsiCo, and all major companies have come up with their own way of design thinking process. They have incorporated this design thinking process into their day-to-day business, and they have successfully applied these principles to their processes and mechanisms. And even some of the products have been designed based on this, using this design thinking principles, and proved successful. Similarly, GE Healthcare has come up with a MR scanner experience. I mean, it has revamped its MR scanners where for children, particularly for children, by using paintings and storytelling mechanisms to make them more fearless for the children. And ABN AMRO has also used it for create a competitive advantage over the others. PepsiCo has come up with a strategic planning, has successfully applied design thinking for strategic planning. And the success story of Bank of America proves that design thinking is how it is useful. Based on these principles, they have restructured their approach towards customers, and it has resulted in 7 lakh new customers with this process. And very interesting stories are also being applied in the civil societies, particularly the Good Kitchen story, where the municipality of in Denmark has successfully applied, where they used to supply the food for elderly people, and it has totally changed the entire picture of food supply chain. So these are all some of these success stories, and there are so many stories are there. Here are some more examples of success stories of design thinking. Path company has acquired investment worth $66 million, and Two Leaves and a Bed company has 34% increase in revenue, and Wacom has 300% increase in traffic, and Netflix user engagement, a better user engagement has been reported, and First Street 400% increase in sales, and Nickelodeon, #1 app for kids in app stores. It has acquired the state, and Airbnb 24 billion valuation has been done because of this design thinking, acquiring this, imbibing this design thinking process. And Optimizely has 46.3% more accounts it got, and Harris again reported $136 million of investment. So these are some of the important examples. There are so many examples are there across all walks of life. The very important feature of this design thinking process is it's not restricted only to business, not only to engineering, not only to medicine. It can be applied everywhere, wherever human interface is there, human engagement is there. That's the important and essential part of design thinking. And it has been successfully applied in education field, the classroom management and classroom engagement of the students. It has been successfully applied in various schools and colleges as well. And design of engineering products, design of mechanisms at various locations with better user engagements. So in all walks of life it is being used. And finally, it can be said, it can be applied even to the personality development of the individuals. Particularly in this digitized modern era where design-led brands are ruling the world, are dominating, and customers have several options and alternatives to choose from. This is going to create a more intense battle among the business giants. Even the topmost engineering giants of 20th century are struggling to keep up with the pace at which the rapidly changing world with the concepts of design thinking. When it comes to the comparison of the earlier era of engineering-led development and today's digitized world development led by the digitized world, the engineering aims at perfection, whereas design don't mind imperfection but values more to the satisfaction levels and perception levels of the individuals or the users, end users. So we need to balance both now. The situation demands the balance of both things. That's what is depicted here. Usually engineers tend to think with the left brain, the analytical brain, and the designing deals with the right part of the brain. So now it's a time to balance both, and both the parts has to work in tandem and produce great results. So when engineering meets design thinking process, they're going to provide or produce beautiful results. Finally, when it comes to the scope of the design thinking, this methodology can be applied to solve the problems wherever human element is involved. It may be business, it may be a machine, or it may be a mechanism, design of a machine or a mechanism or a process, whatever. Whenever human element is involved, this design thinking is going to create an impact and a huge change in the mechanisms. And when it comes to the limitations, this methodology mainly focuses on solving the current problems or betterment of the current situations. Whereas this is not so suitable for futuristic technological advancements and scientific inventions. This is not going to serve the purpose as it is going to solve the problems of today's world. So it has limitations as well. In my subsequent lectures, I'll try to focus on details of implementation of step-by-step processes of design thinking. I'll try to focus on the implementation details of each steps, and so that we'll have a comprehensive idea of the design thinking process.